Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a story so peculiar, it might just bend the way you think about time itself. We're not talking about sci-fi movie plots or fringe conspiracy theories. No, tonight, we're heading into the real world, just slightly tilted, where a man once filed a very real, very official patent for something he called a time-freezing chamber. Yep, a literal box that stops time. And believe it or not, someone at the patent office had to read that without laughing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it there right now? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start by holding a dusty folder in your hands, one of those tan ones with the rusting metal prongs, tucked away in a climate-controlled archive beneath the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. On the front is a long string of numbers and one sentence. Device for temporally static preservation of organic and inorganic matter. Filed 1973. Inventor R.W. Broderick. It doesn't sound like much. Most of the patents in this section are bizarre. Rotating beds for seasick astronauts, a hat that dispenses breath mints, one proposal for perpetual windshield clarity using electrically charged soap film. But this one has weight. Not physically, it's just 18 pages long, but you feel like you've picked up something that might buzz if you held it too long. The abstract is unassuming. The device is described as a sealed chamber constructed to suspend all atomic motion within for the duration of occupancy. The language is technical, like the inventor was trying to be taken seriously. There are schematics that look like a walk-in freezer bolted to a capacitor farm, and a list of recommended entry durations for biological subjects. One of them is marked, Human Use, Trial Phase Proposal, Pending Funding. Right next to it, underlined in blue pen, Volunteers Needed. You flip to the last page and find a hand-signed letter stapled crookedly to the end. It's from Broderick himself, not addressed to any official, but just titled, To Whom Time May Concern. In it, he claims the chamber worked for 15 seconds. He writes, Time was halted. My watch stopped. The candle flame paused in mid-flicker. A hummingbird in the yard appeared frozen mid-hover. And I kept thinking. He says the air inside the chamber felt cold, but not biting. The pressure didn't change. He describes a silence so total, his own heartbeat became unbearable. Like thunder on glass, he wrote. Every thought I had stretched into an echo. And here's the kicker. He swears that outside the chamber, nothing moved. Not the second hand on his wall clock. Not the branch swaying in the wind. Not even the dust. Now, this sounds absolutely impossible, right? And it should be. Freezing time isn't just hard, it breaks the rules. Thermodynamics, quantum physics, relativity, all of it says no. But here's where things get stranger. His application wasn't rejected for scientific implausibility. It was marked insufficient supporting documentation and left open. That's a loophole, not a denial. Meaning if someone were to resubmit it with data, it could technically still go through. And in the margins of one diagram, there's a cryptic note in different handwriting. Could be interference artifact. Cross-check with acoustic tests. You begin digging. What kind of man files this kind of patent? R.W. Broderick was a mechanical engineer. Not a crank, not a dropout. He worked for a refrigeration company in Ohio. Graduated top of his class. Built walk-in coolers for grocery chains. But then, after 1973, he just disappears. No forwarding address. No death certificate. One photograph of him survives, clipped from a trade magazine. He's holding a wrench, grinning next to a Freon compressor. In the background, a box. Stainless steel. Roughly the size of a phone booth. And taped on the inside, a yellow legal pad with the word door scrawled in red marker. The part that makes your skin prickle, though, is this. In the summer of 1980, a small classified ad ran in Popular Mechanics. It read, looking for assistant to test prototype memory chamber. Must not be claustrophobic. Compensation upon return. No contact info. No reply address. Just a P.O. box. When someone traced it later, the box had been closed out in the name of, yes, R.W. Broderick. Now you're deep into the rabbit hole. And just when you think it's all coincidence, you find a handwritten letter in a secondary archive, marked as miscellaneous correspondence, unfiled. It's dated 1996. The handwriting matches Broderick's earlier notes. It's just 3 sentences long. Time doesn't stop, but it folds. Like a napkin. I'm writing from the edge of one crease. What do you even do with that? No scientific community has acknowledged Broderick. No physics journal ever cited his work. But one curious thing stands out. A physicist from MIT, in a 1998 conference, mentioned an experiment involving temporal dilation in closed-loop systems. He said it never worked. But then he added, offhand, of course, Broderick would have said I needed the right silence. And that's the line that keeps you up at night. You leave the patent office with more questions than answers, walking into the early evening light as if emerging from a strange, airless cave. The file is still on your mind, but it feels like the world around you is moving a little slower now. Not because time has stopped, of course not, but because a tiny part of you is watching for it to. You step onto a bench at the edge of a quiet park, your mind looping that sentence. Time doesn't stop, but it folds. So you start your own investigation. Because if there's one thing stories like this demand, it's not blind belief, it's curiosity. And you're very, very curious. You head to the small town in Ohio where Broderick once lived, Lancaster. It's the kind of place with a single main street, a diner that serves real milkshakes, and people who notice if you're not from around there. When you ask about Broderick, no one says much. Not because they're hiding something, but because they genuinely don't remember. Or so they claim. You find an address from a 1972 phone book. It's a squat brick building at the edge of town, now a plumbing supply warehouse. The manager lets you poke around the back, where a dusty room once used as an office still has old wiring in the walls and a fuse box labeled lab. The paint is peeling. There are scorch marks around one outlet. And tucked into the corner behind a shelf, you find something unexpected, a thick metal disc about the size of a dinner plate with a handle and latch. It's not labeled. Just etched into the underside is one word, pause. You take a photo. That night in your motel room, you research the metallurgy of alloys used in refrigeration units from that era. The handle shape doesn't match any commercial product. It's too stylized, more like a prototype or a component for something custom built. Maybe something meant to be hidden. And here's where things start to spiral in the best possible way. You find a reference on an old engineering forum archive from the early 2000s. A user named OldFreezeGuy73 shares a blurry picture of what looks like the same metal disc. The thread is short, only 3 replies. But one of them reads, I used to work with him. Not a nut job. Just too quiet. Said the chamber wasn't supposed to stop time, just thin it. Whatever that means. And that word again. Thin it. Not stop it. Not break it. Thin it. That feels different, doesn't it? Less science fiction, more pliable. Like the world isn't made of concrete, but of silk stretched too tight. You begin hunting down any old colleagues Broderick may have had. Most are gone. But you find one. A man named Ellis Ford, now in his 80s, living in a retirement community outside Cincinnati. You call ahead, expecting a polite brush-off. Instead, you hear him pause on the phone and say, You're asking about the box? You meet him in a sunlit common room, where shuffleboard clacks against the hum of an old TV. He doesn't remember everything, but the things he does recall make your breath hitch. Broderick was obsessed, Ellis says. Not wild-eyed or ranting. Just methodical. He thought you could compress time like you compress air, Ellis tells you. Said the universe was breathable. Said time could be held still, but only in pockets, like air bubbles. Ellis once saw a test. A small one, He put a wind-up toy inside the chamber. One of those little monkeys with cymbals. It played 3 notes, then stopped. Dead still. We waited 15 seconds. He opened the box. The monkey finished its clang like nothing had happened. Ellis laughs. Creeped me out. I told him to patent the thing before someone thought it was a weapon. And apparently, Broderick tried. But here's what Ellis remembers most clearly. He warned me never to stay inside. Said time slows down fine. Stops, maybe. But restarting? That's harder. Like kicking a stalled engine without a spark. You write this down. You write all of it down. Because suddenly this story isn't about a crackpot with a freezer. It's about a man who saw something real, maybe even dangerous, and then vanished before the world could ask the right questions. That night, you dream about a glass room in the middle of a wheat field. Inside it, nothing moves. Not the dust. Not the shadows. Not even your own breath. But outside, the wheat bends and sways in slow motion, like the world is waiting. Watching. Measuring how long you stay. You wake up with one thought, and it isn't rational, but it's loud and clear. What if he's still in there? You can't shake the image. A man stepping into a box, then vanishing from the world. Not because he traveled through time, but because time around him moved on while he stayed perfectly still. It's the kind of thought that feels sticky, like cosmic gum on the bottom of your shoe. You tell yourself it's just a metaphor. A poetic way to think about forgotten people, lost inventions, ideas that didn't fit the moment they were born into. But that metaphor nags you like a ticking clock in a silent room. You return to the patent office. Not the one in your hometown, but the National Archives where older, withdrawn, or inactive filings sometimes end up. It takes time. Fittingly, the file is thin. Just a few typed pages, some figures, a grainy photograph of what looks like a large steel cabinet with insulated tubing along the sides. There's a model number, CR-TF1, Cryotemporal Field Unit, Prototype 1. But what gets your attention is the line, test chamber must not exceed 8 minutes at 1x field density. You reread that part. Must not exceed. It's such a formal way of saying, we tried it. It got weird. And then there's that last phrase, 1x field density. You dig deeper. That term isn't in standard cryogenic physics. It isn't anywhere you can find, actually, except in an obscure paper from the late 60s authored by someone under a pseudonym. It suggests that localized entropy can be manipulated through oscillating magnetic fields combined with extremely low temperatures. You email a physicist friend who specializes in quantum decoherence. She writes back, that's not how time works. But if it were, this is exactly how it shouldn't be done. That's when you realize something else. The patent filing was never denied. It was accepted, but marked non-commercializable and sealed under a technicality about safety disclosures. In plain English, it worked too well to be real, and too real to be allowed. You look closer at the filing address. It's a P.O. box in San Mateo, California. You book a ticket and land 2 days later, squinting into dry, salt-bright sun. The post office is long gone, turned into a vape shop. But you meet someone who worked there back in the 90s, a clerk with an excellent memory for oddballs. That guy, he says, wore the same brown jacket every week, brought a little silver envelope, said he was mailing letters to himself. You blink. To himself. Yup, the man says, popping a mint. Said the postmark would prove something later. Said time was about the envelope, not the contents. It sounds ridiculous, until you remember the patent description. The chamber wasn't built to travel through time. It was meant to suspend it. Preserve the state of whatever was inside. Not teleport it into the future, just let the future catch up while the object waited. And what better way to test that than with mail? What better record of time than something dated, stamped, sent, and opened? You contact the local university to search through archives of incoming mail records. You're not even sure what you're looking for, until you find it, a series of small, silver envelopes addressed to a B. Halstead, all arriving years after they were supposedly sent. The first one was mailed in 1973 and arrived, unopened, uniged, in 1989. The postmaster had joked that it must have been lost in a time hole. Now you wonder if that joke was more accurate than he knew. One of the envelopes is still in storage. You get permission to examine it. The outer material is not standard paper. It's a mylar-like substance used in space insulation. The stamp is authentic, but the ink, oddly enough, shows no signs of aging. Under ultraviolet light, the signature at the bottom gleams faintly, as if it was written yesterday. Inside is a note. Just a sentence, scrawled in small, perfect print. I was right. But not about everything. You stare at that line for a long time. Then you look up at the filing number again. CR TF1. The TF stands for time field, maybe. But the CR? What if it wasn't for cryoresonance, or core reactor, or whatever you thought? What if it stood for correspondence recorded? Because suddenly, this isn't just a science experiment. It's a conversation, one stretched across decades, where only one side knows when the reply will come. The man who filed the patent might not have disappeared. He may have just stepped into a box, written himself a letter, and waited for the world to catch up. The flight home is quiet, but your thoughts aren't. You keep picturing that line, I was right. But not about everything. It loops in your head like a song stuck in the wrong key. You start to wonder, if that message was written from a suspended moment, who was it meant for? His future self? You? Anyone who found it? And if he was right about some things, which part was wrong? The chamber? The idea that time could be held in place like breath in your lungs? You dig back into the archives with renewed obsession. You search for the name B. Halstead again, but this time not as an inventor, more like a participant. And then, buried in an old science fair announcement from the 1950s, you find a name that shouldn't matter but does. Benjamin Halstead, age 14, built a self-cooling container for tomato storage that won him third place in a regional fair. There's a photo. He's got thick glasses, a tie too big for his neck, and a grin that says, I know something you don't. Okay, you think. That's where he started. Cooling. Containment. Early seeds of the chamber idea. But what came next? You trace university records, grant applications, newspaper clippings, every digital footprint and paper trail you can find. And then, in the corner of a 1975 science journal, you spot something odd. An anonymous opinion piece titled, The Ethics of Isolation Technologies. It's unsigned, but the voice is familiar, measured, speculative, strangely personal. It opens with a strange claim, no one thinks about how long a moment lasts until they've built one. That line hits you like a jolt. You reread the entire piece. The author argues that suspending time isn't just a technical problem, it's a moral one. What happens if someone steps into a moment that no longer moves? Do they age? Do they wait? Or do they just exist, untouched, while the universe unfolds around them? Wouldn't that be a kind of loneliness no clock could measure? You remember a phrase from a quantum physics article, observer-dependent temporality. The idea that what counts as now might depend on who's watching. Halstead, if this really was him, wasn't trying to become a time traveler. He was trying to become a time witness. So, what now? You go to a university library that still keeps analog microfilm. You ask for obscure technical filings. The librarian, a woman with half-moon glasses and a knowing smile, raises an eyebrow when you mention CR TIF1. Oh, she says. The freezer guy. That's unexpected. Excuse me. She nods. Came through here years ago. Quiet man. Asked about entropy thresholds and cryo-reinforced tubing. Said he was looking for his minute. I thought it was a metaphor. Guess it wasn't. You ask if she remembers anything else. She thinks for a second. He left a file in the lost and found once. Never came back for it. We were supposed to toss it, but I kept it. Felt weird throwing out someone's life work. Your heart skips. She returns with a thin folder, yellowing at the edges, filled with sketches, margin notes, and a blueprint labeled CR-TF2. Version 2. The notes are Messier, scrawled in black ink. One page has a drawing of a person sitting in a chair inside the chamber. A line beside it reads, "Subject may feel presence of duration, but not passage." You pause. Presence of duration, a phrase so paradoxical it makes your head itch. What does that even mean? That you're aware you're inside time, but not moving through it? Like being conscious during a photograph? There's another page. This one just says, "If I emerge, tell me what year it is. But don't tell me what changed." You sit with that for a long time. Was that the plan all along? To leave the world, not forever, but just for a while? Let it evolve, unfold, dissolve, and then return like a ripple hitting the edge of a pond? What if he succeeded? You begin contacting independent labs. Ones that specialize in fringe technology. Cryo labs. Magnetics researchers. Even a few fringe inventors. You ask the same question. Have you ever heard of someone trying to suspend time inside a chamber? Most say no. A few laugh. One, though, a technician from Nevada, pauses. "Funny you ask," he says. "We got a sealed unit a few years ago. No brand. No records. It was too insulated to open safely. My boss said it was junk. But we kept it. Still cold. Still humming. Still humming." You ask for the model number. He reads it off slowly. Looks like CR-TF3. Your skin tingles. "Is it still there?" you ask. He says yes. You book a ticket. Because suddenly this isn't a story. It's a search. Not for a man, but for a minute. A moment held in place so long ago, still waiting to be resumed. And if the chamber opens, what exactly will step out? The plane lands in Nevada beneath a pale morning sky, the kind of sky that seems paused itself, frozen in that grayish moment just before heat rises off the asphalt. You rent a car, drive out past the edge of town where the pavement ends and the desert begins. The lab isn't glamorous. It looks like a warehouse trying to cosplay as a startup. But you're not here for the decor. You're here for something that hums. The technician, Greg, meets you at the front. He's wearing a faded hoodie that says "Cold is the new bold." You don't ask. He leads you past rows of cryo freezers, glass tubes, humming tanks, and finally to a concrete-walled chamber with a thick steel door at the end. It's labeled "Do Not Open, CR-TF3" in faded red stencil. You put your hand on the door. It's cold. Not just fridge cold, subterranean, unearthly cold. Like the metal itself hasn't touched time in years. You ask Greg how long it's been here. 5, 6 years? We did the math once. The energy draws steady. Minimal activity. But the internal temperature, he pauses, it doesn't match any cryo profile we've seen. Too stable. No drift. That's why we didn't toss it. He taps a monitor beside the door. This thing's still drawing just enough power to keep something going. But there's no movement inside. It's like it's on pause. Your heart thuds. Greg shrugs. Honestly, I think it's empty. You ask if they've ever tried to open it. He shakes his head. We'd need special clearance. Thermal gear, backup failsafes. You know how these things go. But you already know. If this is real, if CR-TF3 is what it claims to be, it might not be empty inside. It might just be waiting. Greg leaves you alone with the chamber. You circle it slowly, running your fingers across the bolts, the seams. There's no access panel, no viewing window. Just a sealed structure and a dull, pulsing hum like the low-frequency purr of a sleeping beast. And then, on the back wall, you spot something. A tiny indentation. A circular groove about the size of a coin. You dig through your bag and pull out the folder the librarian gave you. Inside, taped to one page, is a metal disc with a strange triangle etched into it. You fit it into the groove. Click. The chamber emits a single beep. Then silence. And then nothing happens. At least, nothing obvious. But the hum changes, almost imperceptibly, but there. It's no longer a constant drone. It pulses. Slower. Then steadier. Like a heartbeat. Your skin prickles. You pull back, not knowing what comes next. Then the monitor flickers. A new line of text scrolls across it. Subject integrity. Stable. Elapsed duration. 17 years, 4 months, 8 days. External environment confirmed. Resume. Y/N. You feel like you've swallowed time itself. 17 years. If someone is inside, they've been frozen since the early 2000s. And if what Halstead built truly worked, whoever, or whatever, is in there hasn't aged a day. You hover over the console. Do you press Y? Do you unpause a life? Your fingers shake, but you stop. Not because you're afraid of what might be inside, but because you realize something. Halstead didn't just build this for himself. This wasn't escape. This was a test. And maybe you're the variable. You glance back at the folder. On the last page is a sentence, handwritten in ink that's slightly smeared. Time doesn't freeze. It listens. You don't know what it means. Not yet. But you do know this. Opening that chamber may not restart a man. It might restart an idea. A philosophy of time, unlike anything we currently accept. You take a deep breath and close the folder. You don't press Y. Not today. Instead, you record everything. The chamber, the timestamp, the console logs. You send copies to 3 different archivists and 1 astrophysicist who once gave a TED talk about nonlinear chronology. You don't know if they'll believe you, but you know this can't be lost again. And then you walk back into the desert. You look up. The sky hasn't moved. But somehow, you feel like it's waiting too. Back at your hotel, you lie awake. You keep thinking, if Halstead is in that chamber, when does he think it is? What will he say when he wakes up? Will he even understand what changed? And most of all, what happens if you're wrong, and the moment never ends? You drift into sleep with those questions echoing in your head. And somewhere, far away, a hum continues, steady, patient, alive. You wake up feeling like you slept inside a ticking clock. Everything in your mind is wound tight, the numbers on the console, the hum of the chamber, the handwritten note. Time doesn't freeze. It listens. You repeat that line to yourself like it's a password, or maybe a warning. You check your phone. 2 new emails. One from an astrophysicist, one from a retired cryogenic engineer. Both say roughly the same thing, that chamber shouldn't exist. The engineer's reply is blunt. The internal temperature logs make no sense. No system maintains stasis that long without degradation. Your readings are either fake, or they belong to tech 20 years ahead of us. The astrophysicist is less direct, but more unnerving. If the logs are accurate, the subject inside experienced no passage of time. And yet, entropy still applies to the universe around them. Which raises the question, what definition of time are we dealing with? That one keeps you staring at the ceiling for a while. Later that day, you meet someone who changes everything. Her name is Mai Tanaka. She's a physicist turned librarian, and if you thought you were deep in this mystery, she's already living in its basement. She agrees to meet you at a diner just off Highway 95. She orders black coffee and pulls out a folder fatter than your entire research stack. I found your email. Cute, she says, smiling in that dry, academic way. But if you're going to open that chamber, you need more than curiosity. You need context. You ask what she means. She opens the folder. Inside are pages of notes, hand-sketched diagrams, and a stack of declassified patents. Most of them rejected, a few mysteriously vanished from public databases. And at the heart of it all, Halstead. Or more precisely, Halstead's network. Your guy wasn't working alone, May says. His lab was funded through 5 shell companies. One of them briefly had an address that matched an unlisted DARPA facility. For 6 months. Then it disappeared. You blink. You think this was government-backed? She shrugs. More like government-monitored. They knew about the chamber. They knew what it might do. But then something scared them. You flip through one of the diagrams. It looks like a cutaway of a torus, a ring structure with notations around energy phase interference, sub-zero field mapping, and something called chronoshell drift. You don't understand most of it, but one thing stands out. This isn't just a freezer, you say. May nods. It's a boundary manipulator. Halstead didn't just want to stop time inside the chamber. He wanted to isolate it. Like clipping it out of reality, preserving it like a fly in amber. You pause, staring at a hand-drawn chart titled Chronological Decay Profile, Nonlinear Enclosure. What if he succeeded? You ask. May leans in. Then your man is sitting in a bubble of history that doesn't belong to any timeline we know. And that makes the chamber more than a machine. It makes it a question. You both sit in silence for a while, sipping cold coffee and watching the desert wind swirl dust outside the window. And then May says something you weren't expecting. I think I found the second one. You blink. Second what? She pulls out a photograph. It shows another chamber, almost identical to CRTF-3, but this one is half buried in frost, abandoned in what looks like an Arctic tunnel. Russian research base, she explains. Siberia. It was sealed in 1994 after a supposed containment breach. 2 staff members went missing. The base was shut down 6 weeks later. You stare at the photo. If there's a second chamber, that changes everything. It means Halstead either shared his design, or someone else stumbled across the same idea. You ask her what happened to the base. No one knows, she says. Satellite scans show it's collapsed. But rumor is, the chamber's still down there. Still powered. The idea of 2 identical time-bending machines, one in Nevada, one in Siberia, gives you chills. Not just because they exist, but because they might be talking to each other. Or worse, they might be syncing. You spend the rest of the day poring over May's files. There are whispers of test subjects, temperature anomalies, even a Soviet patent filed under a false name that includes a drawing eerily similar to Halstead's original prototype. One line stands out. Containment of duration is not containment of consequence. It sounds poetic, or terrifying, or both. By nightfall, you're back at your hotel, staring at your notes, feeling like you're assembling a puzzle with no edges. But the pieces are forming a picture now. Not of a man hiding from time, but of time being forced to hide from him. You dream of ice that doesn't melt, of wires humming under snow, of a clock ticking in reverse. And when you wake up, one phrase echoes in your head: Siberia still breathes. It's 3:12 a.m. You open your laptop in the dark and start digging deeper into the base May mentioned. The facility's official name was K-13 Polar Physics Station, a nondescript Soviet research post located near the Yana River. Most of the records are vague, scrubbed, or simply gone. But you find a grainy satellite image from 1995. There's a heat signature, small, circular, oddly consistent for an abandoned building in permafrost. You zoom in. The image is distorted, but there's something unmistakable about that pattern. A circular depression in the snow, roughly the same diameter as Halstead's chamber. You exhale. So it's not just rumor. It's real. By the time dawn paints your curtains, you've made up your mind. If that second chamber exists, it may be the key to understanding the first one, or stopping it. You contact May. I'm in, she says without hesitation. But we'll need help. Help comes in the form of an old colleague of hers, Alexei Morozov, a logistics coordinator who once ran supply routes to Arctic listening stations. When you first meet him, he looks you up and down and says, "You don't have frostbite yet. Give it a week." Comforting. The plan is reckless but somehow simple. May will handle archival research and translate any remaining Russian documents. Alexei will get you transport and gear. And you'll bring a copy of the CRTF-3 blueprint, a thermal drone, and a kind of cautious optimism that only sleep-deprived amateurs carry into frozen wastelands. Within days, you're on a transport flight to Yakutsk, the coldest city on Earth. The pilot grunts when you mention K-13. Locals don't go near that place, he says. Snow doesn't behave right. You don't ask for clarification. You're not sure you want it. The closer you get, the stranger things feel. The GPS gets jumpy. Magnetic north seems to drift slightly every few kilometers. Alexei jokes that the compass is just cold, but May frowns. Temporal interference, she mutters. You're not sure if she's serious. At base camp, the weather turns brutal. Winds howl like wolves, and your breath freezes the inside of your mask. But the structure, the collapsed research station, is there, exactly where it should be. Half buried, creaking faintly under pressure. The outer metal shell has collapsed inward, but the underground shaft remains sealed. May's eyes shine. It's untouched. You spend the next day clearing the entrance. The snow here isn't normal. It's denser, heavy with static, like it remembers something. When you finally pry open the sublevel hatch, a rush of air escapes. Not warm, not cold, just wrong. It smells like ozone and iron and empty calendars. Inside, the facility is a mess of tangled wires and frost-covered machinery. But the chamber? It's intact. Identical to Halstead's. Same alloy. Same engraving on the door, model P3X. Same interface, though this one flickers erratically. May records everything. Alexei mutters something in Russian about ghosts. And then, you find the file. In a cracked terminal lodged into the wall beside the chamber, there's a bootable log still preserved. The text is in Russian, but May translates. Test subject number 02. Exposure initiated 11:23 a.m. Observations ceased after 168 hours due to anomalous silence. Chamber remains sealed. Status, unknown. You read it twice. Anomalous silence. That's not a phrase scientists throw around lightly. May pulls you aside. There might still be someone in there, she says quietly. After 30 years. The thought lands in your stomach like a stone. If someone entered the chamber before the base collapsed, if they were suspended, like Halstead wanted, they might still be inside. Untouched. Unaged. Waiting. You run a scan with the thermal drone. The results are inconclusive, but there's a faint warm signature inside the core of the machine. Not enough to indicate life. Just enough to say, something's still active. You all stare at the console. A single button reads, release. But none of you press it. Not yet. Because the question hangs thick in the frozen air. What if opening that chamber does more than let someone out? What if it lets time itself bleed? You make camp inside the station. The metal groans. The snow outside shifts like it's listening. And as you lie awake that night, staring at the frost-covered ceiling, you realize something that shakes you to your bones. The Siberian chamber doesn't just resemble Halstead's design. It predates it. You wake up to a silence so complete, it feels manufactured. Like the whole world has been placed on mute. No wind. No creaking metal. Just the soft static of your own breath echoing inside your thermal hood. You step outside the ruined station with May and Alexei, crunching over snow that feels heavier than it should. The landscape is unchanged, white as bone, flat as sleep. But something under the surface has shifted. Alexei's pacing a small circle, staring at his compass. Still broken, he mutters. North moves every hour now. May's focused on the chamber terminal. She's trying to pull up anything from the drive, hoping to find more than vague phrases like anomalous silence and unrecoverable variance. You skim a fragment of a diagnostic log she found, and one line hits you harder than the cold. Subject heartbeat observed, in negative time drift? You read it again. Negative time drift. How do you even have a negative heartbeat? You ask. May shakes her head. I don't know. I really don't. But something inside that chamber is violating the normal sequence of events. And if it's still running, it means the system doesn't treat entropy the way we do. You stare at the sealed door. You remember Halstead's chamber. How it pulsed like a heart when you approached. This one doesn't pulse. It hums. Like a long, sustained breath that never ends. Later that afternoon, you and May explore the adjacent labs. Most of them are collapsed, full of broken pipes and frozen wires. But you find a data core locked in a filing cabinet lined with lead sheets. May guesses it was shielded against EMPs or magnetic interference. It takes a few hours to hook it to your gear. When it finally boots, you see the lab name, Cryotime Division. May laughs nervously. Well, they didn't bury the lead, did they? There's a video file. Just one. You brace yourself. A man appears on screen. Heavy parka. Frost in his beard. He's in the same room you're standing in, only cleaner, newer. Behind him, the chamber door is open. My name is Dr. Mikhail Vostrikov, he says in Russian. May translates as he speaks. If you are seeing this, then K-13 has failed. Or succeeded. Either way, what we did cannot be undone. He glances off camera, where someone murmurs, 60 seconds. Vostrikov turns back. We attempted not to stop time, but to stretch it. To place a subject inside a bubble where entropy slows by factors of millions. At first, it worked. Subjects retained heat, thought, pulse. But time grew unstable. He pauses, visibly shaken. We lost subject 1 to forward inversion. She aged 3 years in 30 seconds, then reversed and vanished. Subject 2 remained stable, but now refuses to re-emerge, or perhaps cannot. The final sentence freezes your blood. The machine is no longer ours. It dreams now. May pauses the video. That last part, it dreams now, that's a metaphor, right? Alexei's shaking his head before she finishes. He was a serious man. He didn't do poetry. That night, no one sleeps. You lie wrapped in your sleeping bag, staring at the inside of your tent, wondering what kind of machine can dream, and what it means for a chamber, or anything mechanical, to reach the point where it stops following orders. The concept of the dreaming machine stays with you. Maybe Halstead didn't invent his chamber. Maybe he found the designs. Maybe Vostrikov's team opened something they didn't understand, and Halstead just gave it a cleaner logo and an English manual. You float between sleep and wakefulness, imagining what could be inside that sealed steel cocoon. A man. A void. A moment stretched so thin that it started to feel? May wakes you around 4 a.m. I found something, she whispers. One of Vostrikov's earlier notes. It says he used a timing seed, a resonant crystal tuned to atomic decay rates, to stabilize the field. But there's a margin error. The crystal degrades slightly over time. Not much, just enough that, if you open the chamber too late, you don't know what comes out. You sit up. What do you mean? She hesitates. You might not just pull out the subject. You might pull out the entire bubble, compressed decades, even centuries, all unraveled into normal time in an instant. Alexei peeks in, holding coffee. In other words, he says, boom. Outside, the snow starts to fall again. Soft. Silent. Too perfectly shaped to feel random. You look at the sealed chamber and realize something terrifying. It's not just a container. It's a countdown. The morning is unusually warm for the Arctic, which immediately unsettles you. May checks the barometer 3 times before mumbling, "It's rising too fast." Alexei looks up from his thermal monitor. "We're in the middle of a pressure swell, which shouldn't be happening unless..." He stops mid-sentence. "Unless something just released a surge of energy." You all turn toward the chamber. Overnight, frost has receded from the doorframe. Not melted. Receded. As if something beneath it had siphoned the cold away with surgical precision. A thin ring of perfectly dry metal frames the threshold. "No one opened it," May whispers, mostly to herself. "We set motion sensors. We would have heard." You step closer and spot something even stranger, time-lapse footage from the night. There is no movement, but the snowflakes falling directly above the chamber entrance pause, mid-air, for exactly 8 frames. Then they resume, all while everything else in the frame moves normally. The effect is hyper-localized. 8 frames of frozen gravity. Is that... Alexei squints. Is that the chamber affecting space outside? May stares at the footage. Or time is leaking. You suddenly remember the words from Vostrikov's log, "We don't know what comes out." Maybe you're not just dealing with a machine anymore. Maybe it has become a threshold, an interface between 2 incompatible versions of reality. One where time flows. One where it breathes. To distract yourselves, the 3 of you go through more recovered logs. There's one from a technician named Svetlana who attempted to place a clock inside the chamber while viewing through a time-locked feed. The logs show this. Clock hands move forward, then pause, then backward, then resume at intervals of 61.3 seconds regardless of real-time pacing. Camera feed began to feel unreliable. Image flickered even though equipment tested clean. Reported auditory hallucinations, ticking that did not match any mechanical rhythm. You look up at the horizon. Clouds are forming unnaturally fast. They don't drift so much as assemble, like a time-lapse played in real life. Then May pulls up something new. A list of rejection letters from patent offices. Among them is a partial file titled United States Patent Application Number 13/440-019, Temporal Isolation Container. Your heart skips. That number format matches the one Halstead filed. You scan the document. It's filled with vague terms: temporally inert suspension chamber, entropy decoupling, partial causality shielding. But in the fine print, someone has scribbled a single note, not original. Soviet prior art flagged. So Halstead did rip them off, you mutter. May's already pulling up more files. She finds correspondence from a Russian contact named N. Halstedov. A pseudonym, clearly, and another document with an address in Colorado Springs. Alexei leans over. That's NORAD territory. You piece it together. Halstead had access to Russian Cold War archives. Or someone gave it to him. The original project, Vostrikov's chamber, was deemed too unstable, but Halstead reframed it. Made it marketable. Sanitary. But the mechanism never changed. You return to the chamber again, as if it might answer something now. Alexei points at the access console. It's asking for input. You frown. We didn't power it. He shrugs. Maybe it powered us. You approach cautiously. The screen reads, awaiting temporal anchor authentication. It wants a code, a sequence, a name. You try Halstead. Nothing. You try Vostrikov. The screen flickers. A loading icon spins for a full minute. Then it displays chamber status, internal subject integrity holding, estimated deviation, 143 years. Wait. May exhales slowly. Deviation from what? The chamber opens with a hiss. Not all the way. Just a breath. A whisper of metal. Cold air slips out like a sigh held for decades. Nothing steps out. Nothing moves. But every hair on your arm stands up. Because you can feel it now. The distortion. Like the air is thicker, more layered, more deliberate. You're breathing through pages of a history book no one wrote yet. Alexei whispers, "There's something in there." You nod. Or someone. May stares into the darkness beyond the crack. What if it's him? You mean Halstead? She shakes her head. No. Subject 2. Vostrikov's patient. The one who refused to emerge. You stare into the blackness, thinking of all the possibilities. A person who hasn't aged. Or who aged wrongly. Someone unstuck in causality. Someone no longer synchronized with the arrow of time. And then a soft sound emerges from within. Tick. But it's not mechanical. It's organic. Wet. Like a second heartbeat that doesn't belong to you. May slams the console and the door seals again. The chamber hums. And now, for the first time, you're certain. This isn't just a machine. It's a decision. One humanity made. One it buried. One you just unwrapped like a gift with no return label. After a night of collectively pretending you didn't hear that sound, you wake to find May already dressed, pacing the hallway with a thermos of reheated tea. You join her silently. Neither of you say it, but you both know something changed after the door creaked open. The air is different. It smells faintly of copper now. The instruments flicker inconsistently, and every hour the lights dim for exactly 4 seconds, as if the bass itself is catching its breath. Alexei sits cross-legged in front of the chamber console, studying its standby screen like it might blink. "There's new data," he mutters. "But not from us." You look over his shoulder. The interface now shows anomaly vector divergence, minus 1.7%. Chrono containment holding. Subject uplink pending. None of that was there before. It's reacting to us, you say aloud, more to anchor yourself than to inform anyone. No, Alexei says. It's reacting with us. The room goes silent. May breaks it with a new theory. What if Halstead didn't file the patent to freeze time, but to leak time? Like a siphon. Let it drip forward in intervals. Why? You ask. To observe it. To shape it. To sell it. Her tone is flat, resigned. You all sit in front of the chamber again. It feels more like a seance than a scientific inquiry now. You find yourself whispering. What if it's trying to finish what Halstead started? Alexei gestures to the console. The subject uplink. That's a neural connection request. I think it wants a brain. No way, May snaps. That's not how this works. This is supposed to be an isolation chamber, not a psychic modem. You pace. Your breath fogs. It isn't how it works, but maybe it's how it evolved. The rest of the day is spent testing safer hypotheses. You insert a plant inside the chamber for 5 minutes. It comes out dehydrated, like it aged 10 years. You send in a camera. It returns only 5 frames of footage before glitching into static. But one frame matters. In it, you see a man. Not just a blur, not a shadow, a man. Sitting cross-legged, eyes open, pale, serene. He wears a lab coat and holds something in his hands, a mechanical watch, disassembled into gears across his palm. The caption reads, "Timestamp unknown." You all go very quiet. Halstead? May asks. Or Vostrikov's subject 2, you answer. Whoever it is, they're still in there. Alexei pulls up the logs again, scrolling to a passage written by Vostrikov near the end of his entries. You read it aloud. If time resists interruption, then our machine does not interrupt. It collaborates. It bargains. We are no longer measuring moments, we are negotiating them. You shiver. May finally snaps. This is insane. We need to leave. But you don't move. If we leave, someone else will come. Someone worse. Someone who'll press the button and not even flinch. She nods reluctantly. So we're just, what? Custodians of a frozen heartbeat. You all decide on a plan. One last controlled interaction. May builds a feedback loop that mimics a heartbeat pattern, synced with a basic EEG signal. Not real brainwaves, just a simulation. Alexei warns, it might treat this as a handshake. May smiles without humor. Let's hope it doesn't want to hold hands. You activate the simulation. The console doesn't just respond, it invites. The screen shifts again. Neural pattern detected, incomplete. Requesting alignment sequence. Consent required. It wants permission, which feels far more terrifying than if it had taken control. You hover your hand over the interface, and the screen says, hello. Just that. A single word. May whispers, maybe it's alive. You whisper back, maybe it's lonely. The console pulses with a soft hum, like a cat purring from behind glass. Then comes one final message. Do you remember the agreement? The console freezes. Everything goes still. You wait. One breath. Two. And then the lights dim, not a flicker, but a fade, slow and synchronized. The chamber lets out a sound like wind over a bottle's mouth. Deep. Musical. A minor key lullaby played by physics itself. May slowly powers down the interface. That wasn't just a question, she says. That was a test. Of what? Whether we're the ones who made the agreement, or someone else. You look at the chamber and realize, this wasn't Halstead's invention. He found it, filed it, branded it, but it was already waiting. And it remembers. You wake to silence. Not the comforting kind, but the kind that makes you want to check if your ears are still working. The power's out, not a single blinking light on any of the machines. No backup generators humming. No hallway lights glowing under doors. Even the wind seems to be holding its breath. You step outside your room, flashlight in hand. The hallway is darker than you remember. Colder, too. May and Alexei are already in the lab, standing in front of the chamber like it's a sleeping animal that might wake if you speak too loud. There's no reason the backup system should fail, Alexei says. It's isolated, independent. It doesn't even run on the same grid. You don't reply. You're focused on the chamber. Its surface has changed. You move closer. There's frost on the glass. Not condensation, actual ice. And not just from the outside. It's forming from within. You press your hand lightly against it and feel an odd vibration, almost like a purr. May whispers, it's generating its own time field. Independently. Alexei checks the console, which is dead. No electricity. But it's still running. You suggest what no one wants to say. What if it doesn't need power anymore? No one argues. May pulls out her notebook, flipping to a sketch she drew days ago, an early version of the chamber's internal mechanism. This shouldn't be possible without a power source, she murmurs. Unless it's self-sustaining, you finish. Feeding off entropy. Alexei raises an eyebrow. Time as fuel. Not time itself, you clarify. Disparity. The difference between here and in there. The longer we delay contact, the wider the gap becomes. And the more energy it has to work with. Suddenly, the lights flicker back on. But something's wrong. The clocks are all blinking, but none of them agree. One says 2:13. Another says 1946. May's digital watch shows 23:08. The laptop says it's 1997. I synced everything yesterday, Alexei says. They should match. They did, May replies, already scribbling in her notebook. We're not just losing power. We're losing reference. Your throat is dry. We're sliding. Alexei taps the glass chamber again. It's dragging our local time toward its own frame. A kind of gravity. A chronological sinkhole. You don't respond. Your brain is too busy calculating the implications. It's not just about time freezing. It's about time being reshaped, as if you're standing too close to the mouth of a black hole, not in space, but in causality. Then May says something that makes everyone stop. What if it's trying to match us? Alexei frowns. You mean, it's tuning its field to sync with our minds? No, she replies. I mean, what if it's trying to make us compatible, so we'll agree to connect? You laugh nervously. That sounds like a very long courtship for a machine. No, she says again. Not long. Patient. The air inside the lab feels heavier. You all feel it. The odd sluggishness of your movements, the delay in speech, the way your thoughts seem to stretch like syrup. It's happening faster now, you whisper. I can run a scan, Alexei offers. There's no time, May replies. You all turn toward the chamber. The frost inside has formed concentric rings, like ripples on a frozen pond. And at the center, there's something new. An outline. A silhouette. Human-shaped. Not moving. You inch closer. The outline is unmistakable. A body. Suspended. Still. Knees drawn up. Hands clasped. Head bowed. Not Halstead. Not Vostrikov. You recognize yourself. You stumble back. Alexei grabs your arm. Tell me you see that. I do. May doesn't say anything. She's staring at the chamber like she's trying to rewrite it with her eyes. It's predicting. No, you say. It's remembering. The silhouette fades, slowly dissolves like breath on a mirror. Nothing left but the frost pattern, slowly returning to its former static hum. You step away. May looks at you. If we don't stop it now, we'll become part of it. Alexei nods. We either shut it down, or it finishes sinking. You ask the question you've avoided this whole time. What happens when it finishes? No one answers. Instead, Alexei flips the final breaker and says, let's find out. The lab goes dark again. Except the chamber, still glowing. Still waiting. You open your eyes and everything is off kilter. The floor isn't quite where you left it. The hum of the world has changed pitch, subtle, but undeniable. You're still in the lab, technically, but the air has a thickness to it now, like walking through syrup. The chamber glows in the dim light, and it feels less like a machine and more like a living thing. Or a dreaming one. Maybe both. May adjusts her glasses in slow motion. Or maybe you're just perceiving her that way. You glance at the wall clock, it's ticking backward. Okay, I didn't touch that, Alexei says, pointing at it. Did anyone touch that? No one touched it, May says. Time's orientation is shifting. That's all. You blink. That's all. She shrugs. Better than it imploding. Alexei walks over to the main panel. Power's still cut. The chamber shouldn't be active, but look at this. He holds up a thermal imager. The screen shows a gradient of temperatures across the lab. The chamber is the hottest object in the room, even though it feels ice cold to the touch. So, we're dealing with an object that is both freezing and radiating heat, you ask. No, May says, narrowing her eyes. It's radiating time. You pause. Sorry, it's doing what now? May taps her notebook. If time is a dimension, and we accept that it flows, it's possible, in theory, to emit distortions in that flow, the same way heat radiates outward from a fire. And we're in the kitchen, Alexei adds, grimly. You take a deep breath. So, this machine isn't just freezing time. It's warping the flow around it. Maybe leaking potential futures. Or bleeding old ones. No one disagrees. You notice something new. The calendar on the wall is flipping itself. Slowly, page by page. April, May, June, then back. December, March, January again. I think it's untethered, you say. Unmoored from linear chronology. Alexei frowns. So, what? It's drifting. No, May says. It's anchoring. Somewhere else. Something's pulling it. You hesitate. Not something. Someone. They look at you. You're not sure where the thought came from, but it fits. You glance at the chamber again, and for a second, just a second, you feel a pulse, not in the machine but in your own chest. As if it's echoing your heartbeat. As if it remembers you. Or worse, expects you. May approaches it carefully. She places her hand on the glass. This isn't a prototype, she whispers. It's not a failed experiment. This was always the goal. What was? You ask. A chamber that doesn't stop time, she says, but replaces it. The words hang in the air. Wait, Alexei says, slowly. You think this thing wants to overwrite our timeline? Like, turn the present into whatever it's holding inside. May looks pale. Not overwrite. Merge. You sit down, suddenly light-headed. Merge with what? That's the question, she says. And that's when the lights flicker again. But this time, they don't just blink, they stutter. Like they're buffering. Like reality is trying to load. And then everything snaps back into place. For a moment. Until it doesn't. The lab vanishes. You're standing in a place that looks like the lab, but not quite. The walls are darker, older. There's no equipment, just outlines where objects used to be. The chamber is gone. In its place is a recess in the floor, filled with faint light and swirling dust. You're alone. No May. No Alexei. Only you, and the echo of your footsteps as you step forward. Then you see it. In the far corner, barely illuminated, another version of you. Standing still. Watching. You lift a hand. It does too. Not mirrored. Synchronized. A chill runs down your spine. The other you blinks first. And walks away, disappearing through a door that didn't exist a second ago. You follow. Of course you do. As you pass through, everything shifts again. The door behind you is gone. You're back in the lab. May and Alexei are right where they were. But now they're staring at you like you vanished and reappeared in the span of a heartbeat. You all right? May asks. You nod, slowly. Yeah, I think I just saw something. Or someone. You disappeared for a full minute, Alexei says. Where did you go? You look at the chamber, now quiet and inert. I think. I went ahead. May's voice is soft. Ahead of what? You meet her eyes. Everything. No one speaks for a long time. Then May, almost whispering, we need to shut it down. Alexei is already nodding. You look back at the place the chamber used to be, and you swear, even without the machine there, you can still hear it ticking. But not in seconds. In choices. In what might have been. Back in the lab, things should feel normal again. But they don't. Even with the chamber powered down, even with the instruments back to baseline, you know the room has changed. Or rather, you have. The silence isn't real silence anymore. It's layered. Like you can hear the absence of something that was once here, and maybe still is, hiding between moments. Alexei tries to laugh it off, but it's forced. Well, we've now officially broken time. Who wants coffee? No one answers. May is already at her desk, scribbling equations you can't follow. She's muttering to herself, the way someone does when they're arguing internally but losing on purpose. You walk past her and glance over her shoulder. One phrase keeps repeating in the margins, non-sequential loop corridor. May, you say carefully, what are you seeing? She looks up like she just noticed you're still here. I'm seeing a pattern. Not in what happened to us, but in what will happen. There's a design behind this, not just a malfunction. You take a seat beside her. You're saying this was intended? Yes. I don't think the chamber was designed to operate in a vacuum. I think it was meant to connect to something. Alexei leans in. Like what? Another device. May shakes her head. Another time. You all stare at each other. Then she continues. The way you described your experience, it's like you stepped into a space where your own presence was duplicated. That's not a side effect. That's a signal. You frowned. A signal for what? For whoever or whatever was meant to meet you there. That does it. You all go quiet again. The room seems to grow colder. Or maybe it's just your thoughts catching up. You decide to test the air. Suppose someone filed this patent not just as a stunt or an experiment, but because they knew what they were doing. Suppose they weren't building the machine to alter time for us, but to give someone else access to us. Alexei stands up and starts pacing. You're talking about, what? An intertemporal breach. May nods. A corridor. A hallway between timelines. One with selective doors. And the chamber? That's the keyhole. You run a hand down your face. So we open the door, walk through it, and now what? It closes? Or worse, it stays open. That depends, May says, on what's on the other side. Suddenly, Alexei stops. Guys, I just realized something. He grabs a folder from the cabinet. This is the original patent filing, but it's not the same as the one I read last month. You all crowd around. It's true. The language is subtly altered. The phrasing is more refined. Diagrams are sharper, clearer, and worst of all, it's signed with a different name. Who is this? You ask. May takes a sharp breath. That's impossible. This name doesn't exist in any of the databases. It's like the inventor changed retroactively. You think this is residual drift? Alexei asks. Or a bleed-in, May replies. Something from an adjacent timeline is starting to overwrite the current one. Little changes. Enough to confuse. Enough to disorient. You stare at the document. It's dated 3 years ago, and you distinctly remember no such project existing back then. I think we need to check the security footage, you say. Alexei pulls up the logs. You all lean in, watching. First few hours, nothing strange. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m. the day before, the lights in the lab flicker. A figure walks in. Not you. Not Alexei. Not May. Someone in a dark coat, face hidden. They walk to the chamber, place something inside a panel, and vanish again. No badge swipe. No door opening or closing. The next frame, everything resumes like nothing happened. What was that? You ask, even though you already know the answer you don't want to hear. May freezes the image. She adjusts the exposure. The figure is blurry, but just clear enough to see their face for one frame. It's you. Or a version of you. The hair's different. The posture's off. But the face is yours. Calm. Focused. Intentional. You sit back slowly. I think I was there to calibrate it. To make sure it all happens. From the future. Alexei says. You nod, though it feels like guessing. Or from a possible version of it. May's voice is barely audible now. If this chamber gives access not just to different times, but to different yous, then what's guiding it? Who decides which you comes through? You stand in front of the chamber's remnants again. The glass is cold, but you feel a warmth behind your eyes, like memory trying to surface. A whisper not spoken but understood. You are the door. The realization hits like vertigo. The machine wasn't just built for you. It was built from you. Your choices, your regrets, your potential, all encoded somehow. In filings, in circuitry, in half-remembered dreams. You look at May and Alexei. They're watching you like they sense it too now. Not fear. Recognition. It's strange what you remember next. Not the machinery, not the debates or the lab lights. What returns first is a smell, old paper and warm metal, like a library fused with an engine room. You don't know why, but it comforts you. Until it doesn't. You sit in the lab's far corner, trying to piece it together, but your thoughts keep looping. Not in the forgetful way. More like déjà vu got caught in a feedback loop and started chewing its own tail. May keeps scribbling. Alexei's bouncing a pen off the wall, missing every time. The silence is broken when May finally says, "We should run the chamber again." You look at her like she just suggested jumping into a volcano for better Wi-Fi. Seriously? You ask. After what we saw. She doesn't look up. Exactly because of what we saw. Alexei raises an eyebrow. You want to risk a second exposure? What if we trigger a collapse? Or worse, a merge? May finally looks at both of you. We're already mid-merge. Just because we've been lucky so far doesn't mean we're not changing. Subtly, yes, but consistently. You lean back in your chair. And you think activating the machine again will clarify things? No, she replies. But not activating it might leave us stuck in a half state, where we remember things that haven't happened yet, and forget things that never didn't. You stare at her. That sentence gave me a nosebleed. She shrugs. Good. Means you're catching up. Alexei sighs. All right. If we do this again, we need precautions. Internal logs. Time stamps. Blood tests. Maybe a tether. Just in case you drift again. You nod slowly. And this time, I want full control over the chamber interface. If something feels wrong, I pull out immediately. Deal, May says. The three of you prep the lab. Again. It feels like muscle memory at this point. But something's off. This time, the chamber feels different, like it's waiting. Not dormant. Expectant. You climb in. The door seals with a hiss. You lie back, eyes open. The hum begins. And then, you're not here. Not exactly. You're walking down a corridor made entirely of fractured moments. One wall shows you as a child, dissecting a toaster. The next, an older you, bitter and alone. Further down, you glimpse yourself standing in a courtroom, winning a case. Another version, smiling in a small kitchen, baking bread. Each you, frozen in a loop, repeating the same gesture over and over. Reaching, touching, failing, restarting. Then you see her. At the end of the corridor. Not May. Not someone from your past. Just a girl with eyes like starlight and hands wrapped around a book titled, The Last Version. She speaks without moving her lips. You're late. You step closer. For what? She smiles. For becoming the version that remembers everything. Behind you, the corridor begins to shake. Walls bend inward like the room itself is collapsing. She steps aside and gestures to the book. You pick it up. Inside, each page contains a moment you've never lived, but know deeply. One line reads, "He filed the patent not to build a machine, but to store a choice." The book vanishes. You fall. Back into your body. The chamber door hisses open. May and Alexei are frozen, mid-sentence. You sit up. How long was I gone? Alexei checks his watch. 4 minutes. But May looks pale. No. Something's wrong. You glance at the clock. It's not moving. Not ticking. Just paused. Everything outside the chamber is frozen. You step out. The air feels thicker, like walking through molasses. A bird, mid-flight, suspended outside the lab window. A red pen hanging in mid-air, dropped by someone you no longer see. May doesn't move until you touch her shoulder. She blinks. You're different. Yeah, you say. I remember too much. Alexei snaps into motion like someone hit play. Was that part of the test? he asks, rubbing his temples. No, May answers. I think we've crossed a threshold. The chamber isn't a device anymore. It's an interface. And now it knows us. You walk to the patent filing drawer. Pull it open. There are now 7 versions of the same document, each with a different signature, each stamped with a different year. And in one, you see your name, filed 10 years in the future. Your hand shakes as you hold it up. What does that mean? Alexei whispers. May responds quietly. It means this never ends, unless someone chooses. You look around the lab. Look at them, then at the chamber. And for the first time, you realize you're not afraid anymore, because fear was the invention, and you were just the patent holder. The chamber is quiet now, but it's a different kind of quiet, like the room knows it's being watched from every angle of time. You, May, and Alexei stand in a triangle around the machine, the patent document still trembling slightly in your hand. You haven't let go of it. Not because you're holding on to evidence, but because part of you wonders if it's holding on to you. May says softly, there's one more protocol left. Alexei frowns. We ran every test. She shakes her head. Not a test. A release clause. You raise an eyebrow. You're telling me this thing has an exit strategy? May nods toward the console, hidden in the notes. If multiple versions of the patent begin to manifest simultaneously, especially across incompatible timelines, the device will enter a quantum quarantine. Only one version is allowed to move forward. Alexei turns to you, and you think, what? That means one of us has to stay behind. No, May says. It means one of us has to make the decision. Which timeline becomes real? Which memories we keep? Which ones we let go? You exhale slowly. Okay, but how do you even begin to choose that? May walks to the console. By reading what's already written. She slides a drawer open and pulls out a thick folder titled Provisional Simulations, Observer Bias Logs. It's a catalog, a ridiculously long list of outcome trees, branching futures, moments that never happened but could have, each scenario labeled with a probability index. You flip through a few pages and feel your brain melt. One page shows you disappearing entirely. Another shows May becoming a public whistleblower on the project. One has Alexei moving to Iceland to grow potatoes. Seriously. But then you find something else, a simulation labeled Observer 3, Activation Pathway 9F. It's a complete loop. In it, the chamber works. It doesn't freeze time, but suspends subjective continuity. Users can pause their personal stream of consciousness, returning hours, days, even years later, unaged, untouched, unaware. The only catch, the body remains motionless, inaccessible, unresponsive. Essentially, biological timeout. You run your fingers down the margin. Notes in your own handwriting. Except you've never written them. Not yet. They read, if you're reading this, you've reached the loop. You must close it. Not because it's dangerous, but because it's too tempting. May peers over your shoulder. You wrote that. You nod slowly. Apparently. Alexei crosses his arms. And do you believe you? That's the question, isn't it? You stare at the patent in your hand. One of 7. One of infinite versions. Filed across timelines, each slightly different. Each born from a different decision. And you remember what the girl in the corridor said. You're late. The room feels heavier now. Not oppressive, just full. Brimming with possibilities pressing against each other like a crowded subway of realities. May closes the simulation file. There's still the matter of the final protocol. Alexei looks nervous. How does it work? She doesn't answer immediately. Then finally, one person enters. Alone. The chamber will ask a question. The answer determines which version of the world we keep. You glance toward the machine. And what happens to the other versions? No one speaks. You already know the answer. You step forward. No one stops you. Inside the chamber, it's cold again. But it's not physical. More like your breath is being held by something larger than lungs. You lie back, and the hum returns. But this time, it doesn't rise. It descends. Like sinking into the ocean and discovering you've always known how to breathe underwater. Then the voice comes. Not from the machine. From everywhere. Which version do you choose? You're not given options. You're just given silence. So you close your eyes. And you think about the version where the world didn't know about this machine. Where life remained linear, messy, random. Where people made peace with forgetting things. You think about what it would mean to never forget. To trap yourself in a curated loop of best days and erased pain. And you whisper, the one where we remember that time moves forward. The hum stops. Light floods your vision. You open your eyes. The lab is empty. The chamber is dusty, half disassembled. You step out, and everything feels slower. Not frozen, but quiet, real. There's a note taped to the console. In your handwriting. It reads, "Good choice." You smile. You walk outside. And the wind greets you like it's been waiting all along. So now, you're back in your own bed. Or maybe you never left it. The lab, the chamber, the impossible question, it all fades like breath on a mirror. What stays is a feeling. Not an answer. Not even a theory. Just that quiet little echo in your chest. The version where we remember that time moves forward. Maybe you've felt that before. Maybe that's why you're here. Outside your window, the wind shifts just a little. The air doesn't stop, it just softens. Like even the sky is ready to let go. You don't need to know what's real, or who filed what patent in which universe. Tonight, it's enough to know that some stories exist only when they're whispered, and that even in the face of mystery, you chose to move on. So close your eyes. Let the hum fade. Let the light dim.